Can you see the screen? All right, perfect. Let's move on. So the recording has started, and assalamu alaikum everybody. Let's start off with our second demo class for the paper number 2 series for the May-June 2026 crash course for computer science, IGCSE and O-levels both. So today we are going to finally look and start off with that one part which a lot of you literally hate. And why do you guys hate it? Because you feel that it's super duper difficult. But the problem is that it's not difficult. It's just that you are unable to understand it. Once you understand it the right way, once you build those basic understanding, once you get the idea of how to write something and why are we writing it that way, literally your experience will improve to a very, very, very good extent. So now we're going to start off with the very first aspect of what is a pseudocode. So usually students are told and they have this perception in their mind that pseudocode is equal to a programming language. So remember, pseudocode is not a programming language. It's not a programming language. I always have to repeat this one thing, but it's not a programming language. This is not a programming language. Then what is a pseudocode then? If it's not programming language, what it is? A pseudocode is basically English style statements. So like you write English statements, perhaps they are English statements, but written in a programming style. So like you sort of write commands, which I'm like saying, okay, move here, go there, pick this up, multiply this with that, multiply that with this, and blah, 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 all that stuff. It's basically English statements, but those statements are basically written in a way which represents a programming format. So if anybody asks you to define what a pseudocode is, you're going to say they are English statements, but in a programming way. Now, what do we mean by this? English statements in a programming way. Why don't we sort of do the normal programming directly, statements, but in a programming way? The thing is, the pseudocode has one very good feature. Because we are saying that it's just something which is written in a programming way, but is not a programming language, right? What it is, it's basically English style statements. Then if it's English statements, but we still write it in programming way, what does this indicate? This basically means that if you are ever aware of how to write a command in some programming language, so like for instance, you would have heard the word of Python. A lot of you would have also been learning Python because your teachers would have been like, it's in the book, so you need to learn it. Wa alaikum assalam, Hassan Abdullah, how are you doing? Great to see you here. So yeah, if let's say I have a command for Python, let's say I want to write, hi, my name is Maz, or like hello in Python, how will I be writing it? So for that, even though this thingy is pretty much very understandable, if you just look onto it, you will understand that, okay, it's trying to say hello. But the thing is, whenever I try to write something in an actual programming language, in an actual code, there is a strict rule which I need to follow. And those are basically the grammatical rules. Grammatical rules needs to be followed. The moment you break those grammar rules, your code will not be working. So for no matter what programming language you have, you need to ensure that the grammatical rules need to be met and ensured. So if they are not being ensured and if they are not being met, then there is going to be a problem. And this computer science, whenever we call these grammatical rules in some programming language, we refer to these grammatical rules as something known as syntax. So in chapter number 7 and chapter number 8, if you're reading the book or you're looking onto some online article or something, you're going to hear the word syntax again and again. Now, what does the word syntax mean? A syntax is basically the grammatical rules for a specific programming language. So now if I'm doing the same statement, but if I, let's say, copy the whole thingy and just create a duplicate of it, how do you do that? Yep, like this. So now if I have the same duplicate, but rather than having print hello like this, what if I miss this bracket, even though it's still pretty much very evident that I'm trying to say hello just the way up here, but this thingy, the one below, this will not be working because it does not meet the condition. There is no bracket up here. So the grammatical rules are not being met. But in the upper one, it's going to be working perfectly fine. Why? Because our rules are being met. Now, the thing is, when we talk about pseudocode, the pseudocode does not have this strict sort of grammatical rules, which is the biggest benefit to us, because we are just introducing ourselves to the world of programming. So we want to do it on a platform which is not having a lot of restrictions for us. So yeah, so that is why we say that whenever we talk about pseudocode, this basically means that we do not need to follow a strict syntax. We do not, do not need to follow a strict syntax. This also means that if your code is indicating that you are trying to do this correct thing, even though it might not be looking correct in a programming language, but you are trying to give this some sort of sense to the answer, or like even in any sort of programming statement, if you just read it and it is trying to indicate something the right way, you will be getting marks for it, because your examiner will never be deducting marks on stuff like, okay, you did not add a comma, you did not add a semicolon, you forgot a bracket, or you messed upon some grammatical rules. Or rather than like if you're doing Python, in Python you need to write print in lowercase characters, like all low, print, but lower one. But in pseudocode, it's up to you. You want to write it the lower one, you're going to get marks. You write it the uppercase one, you're still going to get marks. So there is no set of strict rules which you need to meet if you want to write something in pseudocode. And that is the reason why at O levels or IGCSE levels, you are introduced to pseudocode, so that you first of all understand how to write something without that strict syntax. And this comes under the PDLC's stage number 2. So you're just sort of creating a design and you're just sort of writing those algorithm steps, but in a programming way. Now it's written in a programming way, but it's not programming code. And then later on, if I want to make it something official, I can then code it along my way to make it something workable in a proper programming language. But the pseudocode, it's not that complex. So first and foremost, don't worry. If you're messing up a bit of it, you're still good to go. Don't worry at all. Now, before jumping into the coding part, the very first thing which I would like to discuss with you all is basically operators. Now, definitely, whenever we are talking about computers, whenever we are trying to create some programs, the biggest and the foremost important thing is then we need to add stuff, we need to subtract stuff, or perhaps we need to do mathematical calculations onto it. So we will be starting off pseudocode with the aspect of operators. We're going to see what type of mathematical calculations can you do on pseudocode. And these operators are something you would be getting more familiar with as we move alongside the course. Now, to first of all tell you how to derive something, or maybe how to basically do something in your pseudocode, the first function or the first operator, which is basically the most commonly used, is basically this plus sign. Now you would be aware what this plus means. This is basically for the addition operation in the mathematics world, right? So I might say that if I want to add something, but I want to denote it in some pseudocode language. So like if I want to add two numbers, but I'm writing pseudocode, how will I be doing it? An example could be like, okay, 2 plus 3. So if you want to add something in pseudocode, you always do it this way. You add a plus sign, right? These are like the operators. You're going to make use of them. Just like that, definitely if I want to divide it, I'm going to make use of the minus sign. This minus sign refers to subtraction. So like if I want to do something like 10 minus 3, I won't be doing 10 sub 3, or I won't be like 10 subtract 3. I would be just like 10 with this one dash sign and then the number 7, 10 minus 7. Just like that, if I want to multiply it, so it's not like while writing the code, you need to write X. It's basically, yeah, you can sort of write the word X, but it's not X. Ideally, it's basically an asterisk, something like this, which is basically this thingy, a cross, and then you add a tilted cross on the cross, and then you basically add those other diagonals too. And this is what we have as a symbol for multiplication. Now, people do refer to it sometimes as just cross, but I would recommend that don't just do X, because what if the examiner does not get what you're trying to say and they count it as X? So there is a possibility of making an error, right? So it's basically better to do something like this. It's being the best possible answer in this case. Just like that, if I want to divide it, you don't have to use the conventional wa alaikum assalam to see how you're doing. Yes, perfect. Bilkul Hassan, the one which you just sent in the chat box, exactly this one. So it's not very much important that you make it pretty much very similar to this, but yeah, it should look like a cross or something like that, so that it could be a clear indicator that you're multiplying something. I'm doing great, alhamdulillah. So just like that, if I now want to divide something, so it's not like you need to make this symbol. This symbol is not accepted, nor is divide keyword accepted. So if you want to divide two numbers, you need to add a slash like this. This is the important thing. A slash like this, inclined slash. Okay, and this inclined slash is basically known as forward slash. Okay, so if you are ever referring to this, it's basically a forward slash, and this thingy is used for the purpose of dividing something. Just like that, if I further on to want to like do something, a calculation like, okay, 2 raised to power 3. How can I do 2 raised to power 3? You might be saying, okay, sir, we have to write it on the top or bottom, this direct. It has to be in the middle or like at the bottom. You won't write it at the top though. So it's like if you want to do something like, you're going to do it like this, 2 as 10 multiplied by 4. Or you can even do it something like this, 10 multiplied by 4. It won't create that much of a problem. Just the way I said, there is no strict rules onto it. But the official notation behind multiplying something is basically this. So even though you might refer to it this way, it's also correct, but this is the official notation, official way. But I won't say that this is not valid. This is also valid. Both of them are basically valid, but this is the official way. So if you can go with this, it's like sort of a better practice. It's not like going to get extra marks for this or somewhat, but yeah. Now I was just talking about, okay, if I want to do 2 raised to power 3, what will your answer be behind it? How can I do it? So maybe some of you would be like 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2. Okay, that's correct though. But what if I want to do 2 raised to power 12? So do you have enough space to multiply 2 with itself 12 times? It's going to be a bit challenging. So if you want to do a raised to power function in pseudocode, you make use of this symbol, this hat symbol. We call it a hat symbol. So this thingy is basically used for power. So for example, I want to do 2 raised to power 3. So it's just basically going to be 2 and then this symbol 3, which is basically indicating this function, 2 raised to power 3. So whenever I do 2 hat 3, it's an indicator that I want to do 2 raised to power 3. So now whenever we're going to write pseudocode where we want to multiply something to a power level, we need to write it this way, 2 raised to power 3. And just like that, the last one would be like, what if you would have definitely studied it in your O-level and IGCSE maths too, that if I want to group something like, okay, I want to do 2 plus 3 plus 6 plus 8. So, okay, I can do it this way, perhaps, but I can also do it something like, okay, this has been grouped with this. Now, what does this grouping mean? It basically means that first this needs to be solved and then these two would be added to it, right? Maybe I can do -4 up here and that could be a different group too, which means that first the inner side is going to be solved and then the outer side is going to be solved. So if I want to group something, for that, even in pseudocode, you can make use of these grouping brackets. So you can use this for grouping purposes, Now, all these operators which I just discussed with you all, these are the mathematical operators. Now, these mathematical operators are sort of very important because they sort of are the fundamentals which allow you to do all the other sort of calculations. So let me even write up here, these are mathematical operators, and these are the foremost introductory stuff which you need to learn whenever you're trying to create a program, because whenever you're trying to code something, is this power symbol also known as caret? I'm not sure about that. I personally have heard it as hat, but we can have a look at it. Is the hat symbol also called as caret? Let me see. Yep, it is. The hat symbol is commonly called a caret. So if I have to just also paste this for you guys, I just got it from Google. I wasn't aware of this, but yeah, it is also known as caret. So yep, you can, oh my bad. So you all can see it up here. It is something also called as caret. So if you are someone who might call it a caret, that's also fine though. But it's generally known as a hat symbol. Okay, hat symbol, this thingy. So if you're ever looking onto it and it's like something like at the top, don't worry, you can write it towards the mid and it's wherever you are convenient with. Again, there's no strict sort of rules behind it, so you would be good to go either way. So yeah, so now we have seen that what are the common operators. So now if I want to do some mathematical calculation, definitely I'm going to make use of these operators. So like if I want to ask you one question that, okay, I'm trying to write a pseudocode statement that adds 2 numbers. So if I want to do 5 and I want to add 3 into it, how will I be doing it? Do I need to write the add keyword up here? No, that's not acceptable. What do I need to do? Can I do something like, okay, this and symbol? No, that's not fine too. Can I do something like add? No, that's also not fine. Then what will I be doing? I'm just putting a plus sign. So whenever I'm trying to make these calculations, I'm basically going to be using these operators. Just like that. Now, if I, let's say, ask one question that, for instance, I want to find the sum, right? I want to find the sum and I want to find the sum of, like, let's say this is sum, and this sum is basically a storage container, or this is like a container which stores some sort of data. Okay, a container that stores some value. Definitely, if I'm creating a program or I'm creating some application, there has to be something which needs to store my data, right? So like if you open up your calculator, you can have a look at what was your most recent calculation. Where on the computer is that thingy going to be stored? It is going to be stored in a container. And this container that stores a value, just the way Nafia told us, it's called as a variable. So that specific thingy where it stores your value, which stores any value, is basically known as a variable. So now this thing is basically one slot in your memory. Chapter number 3, remember hard disk. We said that you are going to have a hard disk, and then in that hard disk, you can store file. Like if this is my hard disk, in that, let's say one part of it might be storing one value. Let's say this is storing some value. So this container, this specific box within my hard disk, I call this one container which stores some sort of data as a variable. But now, okay, this variable, this container is going to be storing some data, but how will I be assigning data to it? So like if I say that, okay, I want to add 3 plus 5, and I want to keep or perhaps get its answer in a variable with the name of sum. Variable, basically, I'm saying that, okay, I want to add these two numbers and I want to keep the answer in this specific container or this specific variable or this specific uniquely identifier, which I can basically call again or use again. But whatever this answer is, I don't want to be like, okay, where I'm always going to be doing like 3 plus 5, 3 plus 5, 3 plus 5. That's pretty much very, like you can say, dumb approach, right? If I have to write 3 plus 5 throughout my code, perhaps I might be like, okay, I need to store the sum somewhere. So if I want to store something in some place, how will I be assigning this answer to a specific variable? So remember, whenever you want to assign something, for the purpose of assigning, we have a special sort of arrow. And that arrow looks something like this. So this arrow basically indicates that whatever you have at this side, on the right hand side, whatever this answer is, you need to basically take this answer and you need to evaluate it and then put it in this container on the left hand side. So it's basically take from right and place in left So you're going to evaluate the value at the right hand side. So it's going to be 3 plus 5 is going to be 8. And then the value 8 is going to be stored in this container or in this variable. So like now later on, if I want to look on my memory, what's the value of the container sum? It's going to be having the value of 8 because it basically got the value from this step. So now the point which I want to highlight here is that what does this arrow mean? This arrow is basically known as an assignment operator. So whenever I want to basically assign something, I'm always going to be making use of an assignment operator. And this operator is exactly, bilkul perfect Khan. It's going to be just like this. If I want to assign something from right hand side to the left hand side, I'm going to make this assignment operator. And this assignment operator is created with this. Yes, today we have the deadline till 21st. So I guess you do have time till tomorrow too. So this arrow is basically going to assign the values in the variable. So we call this arrow as an assignment operator. Usually, why am I teaching this? Because a lot of people, they are basically told that because definitely you all have been studying mathematics too, right? So like if you want to add something in a specific container, like let's say I have a value of x, and that x you want to modify like x equals to 5 plus 2. So in mathematics, we do it this way, right? X equals to 7. This is what we do. So a lot of people, when they come to computer science, they also think that the same logic would be applied up here, but it's not going to be applied. In computer science, whenever you want to assign something, the way in maths, we are assigning the answer of this side in the variable or in this container of x. The 7 is going to get into this, but we make use of this equals to sign. Here, you cannot make use of equals to. Why? Because this equals to is going to be used for some other sort of operation. So for whenever you have a computer science pseudocode statement, you are going to be making use of an assignment operator. That assignment is like for the registered students, they were given an assignment for paper 1, chapter 3, 4, which they're going to be submitting, and then the TAs are at my TAs will be basically marking them and will be providing them with feedback as to how you need to basically improve it and all that stuff. So yeah, so do we use arrow while initializing as well? Yes, bilkul. If whenever you want to see what's initializing, we're going to come to that later on. But now, by the way, Amna, we're going to discuss initializing because it's a bit sort of a next concept. So we're going to come to that later on. But yes, whenever you want to assign something a value, definitely initializing also means that you're assigning value to it. To all those who are not aware of initializing, don't worry. Initializing basically means that if I have a blank, or if I have a new variable, or I create a new container that, okay, I'm basically storing the product of something. So I want to create a program which stores the product of two numbers. So whenever I'm trying to create a new program, the first thing would be that I can basically, yeah, sure, I can. Sure. It's available on your Google Classroom. You just go to your classroom, and there in the assignment section at the top, you're going to find the, what do we call it, chapter 3 4 assignment. You can just open it up and the PDF is up there. So you can just solve it there and then re-upload it up there too. It represents the sum of the value. This arrow basically means, it does not mean that it's basically for the purpose of sum. This arrow basically means that whatever you have at this right hand side, whatever this value is, take this value and place it in this box of sum. So for instance, I want to multiply something. I can have like, okay, product, and let's say this product is a variable which is going to store something. It is a container that is going to store some value. So if I have something like 2 multiplied by 5, let's say 2 multiplied by 5 is what? It's going to be 10. But I want that this value of 10 needs to be stored somewhere in the memory, because I want to keep it in the memory. Remember, I told you guys about this one thingy, that whenever we are decomposing a problem, we always need to focus upon the storage part too. We need to look onto how we can store it. So if I now want to store the answer of 2 into 5, how will I be doing it? I basically would want to take this answer, and I'm going to take this answer and put it in a variable like product. Now, if I want to put this answer, or perhaps take this answer, I'm going to put it in product. What I'm going to be doing is, I'll be basically putting an assignment operator in between. So something like this. So product 2 into 5. This basically means that whatever answer you have at this side, you just need to take this value, and you need to keep it in a memory position named as product. So this product is some slot in the memory. So like if I create my memory, in the memory slot, there will be some place known as product, which is going to have a unique identification. So I can say that, okay, you have 10 drawers in your home, and then one drawer will be having the name of product. It is only going to be storing the value of product. So now when I do this calculation of 2 into 5, the answer is going to be taken and placed into this product value variable. This means that the value is going to come up here. So I'm going to get 10 up here. And now this is permanently sort of stored in my memory. So whenever I want to store something, or I want to keep it in my, or like give it a sort of a name, we create a variable. Now we're going to discuss this later on too, but the point here to note is that if I want to assign a specific entity some value, we're going to make use of this assignment operator, which has the purpose of telling that whatever value we have at the right, you just need to assign that value to this thingy. So now next time I'm like, what's the value of product? So now let's say I don't have this. Later on, like at some other line, I'm like, okay, what's the value of product? What's the value of product? So the value of product is going to be whatever is inside it. So what's inside product? You would be aware, because in this line we saw that product value, a variable, had the value of 10 inside it, right? So when now if I execute this command of what's within product, it's going to be basically 10. And that is the whole purpose of assigning stuff. So whenever you want to assign something, or like initialize, now what's initializing? Initializing basically means that if you create a new sort of a variable that has nothing inside it, like let's say I want to create a program which needs to basically calculate what's the product of a few numbers. But isn't variable a temporary storage though? Yes, you are correct, it is sort of a temporary storage though. But within that program, let's say I have to add 100 numbers, but I want to add the 100 numbers. Now I can't be like writing it this way, right? So like you won't get it at this point because we haven't studied loops. But for now, just understand, that is why I didn't want it to discuss variables though, but you just brought up the concept. But for now, just understand that whenever we talk about assignment operator, this basically means that values are being assigned to something. Now we're going to discuss this, why we need a variable, in once we discuss the loop part, so that I can give you an example with that context. It is sort of pretty much very important. And the reason, to be honest, if you want it at this point, would also be something like, okay, if I want to create a program, if I, let's say, want to create a program where I'm like, okay, input 10 numbers. So like you need to input 10 numbers, and I need to calculate the sum of all of them, all of the numbers. So if I have to calculate the sum of all the numbers, how will I be doing it? So I'll be creating a variable with the name sum, and then I would be like, okay, let me add one by one each of them onto it. I will be adding everything into a single variable, so that it can basically, I would be like, okay, I'm that one kid, my name is count, or like I'm sum, and whoever is entering the class, I'm basically counting how many of them entered. So like, okay, one of you entered, the other of you entered, the third of you entered, the fourth of you entered, and I'm basically counting. So I basically at the end I'm aware of what's the total value. So that's like sort of a vague explanation, but don't worry, once we discuss variables, at that point you're going to get it the better way. I don't want to get into this discussion because it's just going to confuse you all. For now, just understand that we have something known as a variable, and that variable has the duty of storing some value. And if I want to assign, or I want to keep, or I want to place some value in that as what do we call it, variable, I'm going to be making use of this arrow, which I call as an assignment operator. So now in exam, if you see this arrow, it has the name of assignment operator, point number one. And secondly, if you have to assign something to a variable, you cannot do equals to. This is incorrect. So equals to is incorrect. Okay, let me write this up here too, so that if anybody of you is making use of product equals to 10, that is incorrect, especially when you want to assign data. Incorrect. Because this equals to have some other purpose for assigning data. Okay, so this was the second thingy which I want you all to understand whenever you want to basically look about, or whenever you want to do something related to, for instance, some calculation, or when you want to add something, or when you want to assign some value into a specific sort of variable. So now, what if I say that I have a scenario, like let's say I want to assign some value, perhaps assigning की बात तो हो गई है, but let's say whenever we are making use of computer, the biggest aspect of our computer is that computer always needs to make decisions. Computers is based, or are basically based upon the probability or the power of making multiple decisions. So I'm like, okay, if the charging is, let's say, greater than 20, then do nothing. But the moment your charging is less than 20, send a WhatsApp, not a WhatsApp though, send a message or send a pop-up on your screen that your battery is running low. Just like that, okay, the moment my phone's battery is basically less than 10%, change this color of this, what do we call it, battery thingy to red, so that I can know that my battery is running low. What is all this? It's basically different sort of decisions. So our computers are always making decisions. And when we are coding something, or when we are making a program, we are also sort of in a similar scenario. We are also sort of again and again creating and making different decisions. So we need to make decisions between multiple things. Okay, what if this thing happens? What if that thing happens? So when you're trying to solve a problem, when you're trying to solve or create an algorithm for a specific scenario, or when you're going to be writing those complex codes, you will be always required to make decisions. And now, because we are discussing the pseudocode part, now the point is we need to understand that how can I make a specific statement in pseudocode. So like, for instance, if I have a scenario where I say that, okay, we go to carnival, okay, and in that carnival there is a ride. We go to a carnival, there is a ride which has the following conditions, which has the condition of age being less than 18. Less than 18. Make a program to check whether a person would be allowed or not. Make a program to check whether a person would be allowed or not. So what's happening? We need to make to check whether, so basically we need to make a command or a program where we need to check whether a person would be allowed on a ride or not. Whether a person will be allowed or not. How will we be doing this? So we know one thing. We basically know that, okay, it will be allowing any person who is less than 18, who would be having an age less than 18. So there is a decision, right? I'll be like, okay, Subhan, are you greater than 18? No, you're not allowed. Subhan, Mariam, are you less than 18? Oh, yes, you can come on. So what's happening? We're making a decision. So if I have to write the code for this program in pseudocode, if I want to make this decision, what's the decision factor? It's basically this, that we need to look onto the age thingy. So how will I be making this decision? For that, we have something known as conditional statements. So whenever you want to make decisions in pseudocode, we need to use conditional statements. Conditional statements. And conditional statements basically are those sort of statements or those specific keywords or those specific words which when you use, you're basically going to be solving a specific problem. So like you're going to be that's a different story, that's a different story, but yeah, you basically can make a condition out of it. So like if this thing happens, then do this, otherwise if this does not happen, then do this. So when we have this if, then this, then do that, otherwise do this, for this we have some specific format, and that format or that specific style of writing pseudocode statements is what we call as conditional statements. So we have two types of conditional statements in our IGCSE and O-level computer science course. The first one, which is perhaps the most easiest one, is basically known as if, then, else, and if. Else and if. This is basically one structure. Now you would be like, what does this if, else, then, and if mean? It basically is sort of a structure, and between all these three dots we're going to be writing some sort of code. We're going to write something in between it so that we know that okay, it's going to be following some structure. So like if I have to write this one code, if you go up there, remember, whenever we want to dissect a problem, we need to identify what inputs we need to take. We need to see what processes we need to make, and then we're going to also see if we want to output something, and perhaps in the end, if I want to store something, okay, if I don't want them, leave it. So at this point, if I look onto this problem, what are the common things which I can figure out? The first thing would be definitely, if I'm going to highlight it, I see that I would be requiring age to be inputted, right? I need the age because I want to, no, okay, that's, I'm going to come to that later on. At this point, just count it as else, okay? There is nothing like else if. I even created a video on this. It's basically else for, okay, we're going to come to that after this. Don't worry, Abhi leave it, say. So now, if let's say we have a variable which we need to take from the user, right? If I create a program, definitely anybody using it would be required to tell me what their age is. This means age in this case would be my input. So this means that whenever I want to take some value from a user, or if I want to input something into the computer, remember chapter number 3, I was talking about input device, when you want to tell the computer something. So in this case, I would be required to tell the computer my age, right? So like if I want to tell the age to my program, so whenever you want to input something into a program, you do it in a way where you need to write the keyword input followed by something. So input, in this case, we're for inputting what? We're inputting the age. So I'd be like, okay, input age. What does this statement mean? This basically means that whenever I write this thingy, it basically is trying to indicate that you're going to be inputting the value of age to the computer. Now the computer knows your in age. So it's basically that specific sort of prompt coming up on your screen where you enter the value on keyboard and press enter, so that now the computer has your value. Now once the computer has your value, the second thing is that it's going to be processing it. Now how will it be processing it? It's going to make a decision. And how will it be making a decision? It will be making a decision by comparing your age with something. Now how will that be done? For that we have this conditional statement, right? We're going to make use of this conditional statement. So for instance, I want to make use of this if, then, else, and if. Now how will I be making use of it? So it's basically, I'm going to write the keyword if just below the main statement. Okay, let's say this is a line. If, after if, I'm always going to be writing my, I'm always going to be writing my condition. So like if age is less than 18, in this case, we are aware that if the age is less than 18, when do we use age? So like we are making use of age, like this age, or is it like you want to ask some different sort of age? Yeah, how? You can just send a question, then I can get back to you. Say, acha, okay. That thing, that is basically when you want to indicate some text. At this point, this age is basically a variable. It's not like when you open up a computer and it won't be like, okay, you were entering your age. So can your age be something like AGE? No, right? It's going to have some numerical values. Like someone age might be like 23, or maybe someone age might be 16, or maybe someone age is like 9. So now these values are something which you are going to be inputting, but these are values that are basically stored in this specific variable. Now this age is a variable in this case, but it is storing some value. So now the one which you are trying to say, where you have these marks again, these what do we call it, apostrophe, not apostrophe, quotation marks basically surrounding them. This basically indicates something which is related to text. Now we're going to discuss this later on. I won't be discussing it right now. It is something related to the end of chapter 8 again, so I don't want to confuse everybody at this point. So we're going to discuss this later on. Otherwise you can reach out to me after the class and then I can discuss it with you. Yeah, perfect. It's string basically. Yeah, but don't worry guys, we're going to discuss this at the start of chapter number 8. For now, just leave it. So now at this point, whenever the user inputs something, they're going to input some sort of number, right? So I might be like, okay, I want to enter 19, which is my age. So this 19, when I input it, it's going to go into this age container or this age variable. It's going to be stored inside this. So now this value of age is having what? It is having the value of 19. So what are we trying to see? We are basically evaluating if 19 is less than 18. If 19 is less than 18. If this specific statement is true, then you should do something. If this specific statement is true, where I say that if your age is less than 18, then what? Then this basically means that a person is allowed, right? So now if I want to tell the person something, or I want to display something to the user, or I want to tell the user that, okay, you are allowed to do this, or I want to bring some text on the screen, for that reason, I will be making use of a keyword known as output. Perfect enough here. So now if I want to write the keyword output, I would be like, then output. And then after output, now comes the main point which you were just talking about, Amor Sadiq, that whenever I want to represent some text, whenever I want to represent some text, or I want to write some sentence or some keyword, or not keywords, some like sort of letters or some English statements, I might be like, hey, my name is Mars. So now, hey, my name is Mars is not something which basically a computer program can write on its own. It's basically an English statement which I want to tell the computer so that it could bring it on my screen so that you all can see it. So whenever you want to basically bring something onto the screen for the person to see, you are going to be adding these quotation marks. In this case, I'm going to be writing allow. So these quotation marks basically means that you are trying to write something as a sentence. It is basically also given the name of a string. We're going to discuss this later on. But for now, just understand that when we say that it has these quotation marks, it's basically referring to how we have a sentence being printed out. A sentence being printed out. So now whenever you want to basically print out something or print out a specific sentence or a statement, which is basically like an English sort of statement, we're going to be basically making use of these quotation marks. Now to address the questions where you all are saying, oh, okay, easy, chill. Is it necessary that then should be below age? Okay. Now the thing is, and when do we know what to write in capital? Okay, when and how we need to use indentation? Okay, all three of these questions are related to indentation. No, it's not only relevant to making use of it in output. Whenever you want to write some sentence in anything, so like I might want to store the value of, like, let's say my name is Mars, right? So if I want to store my name in a variable, I won't be writing 768, right? I would be writing my name, but I cannot write Mars. Why? Because MAAZ computer would be like, okay, MAAZ is some function or some command, but it might not be a command. So computer will be giving you error. So whenever you want to write some text, so like I want to write Mars as text, right? So you can basically, whenever you want to add some text, you're going to write it in such quotation marks. So like in this case, if I want to write name, it will be assigned in this way. So it's not only an output, it could be literally used anywhere, but whenever you want to pop some text or whenever you want to write some text, English statements, you want to write some English statements or some sort of text, you're going to add these quotation marks. If you don't add these quotation marks, remember, your computer would be like, okay, this allowed is either some variable, or this allowed is some sort of command, or this allowed is some sort of computer terminology which it wants to execute. But because it will not find any record of it, it will then give you an error. So whenever you want to print some text, or you want to input some text, or you want to represent some text or English statement, you will always be required to put these quotation marks. Now to basically address all the questions, so anything we want to pop on the screen, we'll put in the quotation marks. Yes, whenever you want to pop up some text, The important point here is not numbers. Like if I want to print some numbers, okay, we're going to discuss this later on too, but for now, whenever you want to show some text on the screen, you're going to make some use of these quotation marks. So you make use of these quotation marks and it tells the computer, these quotation marks are basically identifiers. They basically tell the computer that, oh, this person is saying that whatever is between the first quotation mark and then the last quotation mark is basically some text, and this text either needs to be printed or maybe based upon whatever. Now in this case it's going to be printed. Why? Because we have output, right? But whenever I want to store it in a variable, or like I want to take it as an input, like in this case, if I want to store the value, like name should this mass, which is a string, or whatever this text file of whatever this text statement is, mass, this should be basically stored in this variable with the name of name. If I want to do it that way too, I would be still putting these quotation marks. So even if I'm storing it in variables, whenever I want to store, or I want to process, or I want to basically manipulate, or I want to output, or whenever I want to do any sort of task or function with a specific text, remember, sentence, English statement, some text, but the main keyword would be text. Whenever I want to do something with text, I will be making use of these quotation marks. Now how do we know that what to write in capital? Now the thing is, just the way I mentioned earlier, it's not necessary to write these thingies in capital, then, if, input. But how it's generally known is that all these thingies, this input, this if, this then, this output, we call these things as keywords. Now, why are they basically referred to as keywords? These are basically called as keywords because they do some specific task. They do some specific set of actions. Now, the computer is aware that output basically means that whatever is after this, you need to bring that thing onto the screen. Input would mean that you need to get something from the user. If would mean that it is a start of a conditional statement. So anything that is basically a keyword, we're going to be writing it in a capital form. But now the thing is, if you don't write it in capital form, there will be no losing of marks, because pseudocode never has a strict syntax. Even if I write it something like input with a smaller lowercase, you won't be losing marks on this at all. Now, apart from that, the question which was raised by Kurat and also Samraj regarding the indentation, or like if you might have also this one question, this gap between if and then we have sort of this gap and then this gap, this staircase gap, this gap is basically known as indentation. Now, why do we have this gap? We're going to discuss this later on, and then you're going to get idea behind why we are trying to do this. But I want you all to just focus a bit on a few examples, and then I'm going to come to that point. So yeah, so while writing, Nafia, your question is also identically same. This gap which we are leaving at the start, we call that gap as indentation. And why are we doing it? We're going to discuss this after a few examples, so then you can have a better understanding of it. But now we're going to just look onto these conditional statements. So now if I do this thingy, it basically says that if the age is less than 18, if this statement is true, if this statement is true, if whatever the user age is, whatever the input, if it is less than 18, then you should basically output allowed. So this is basically English statement. You input age and then you like, if age is less than 18, then output allowed. But let's say it's not less than 18. Let's say it's not less than 18. What will we be doing in that case? So let me remove the word keyword so you don't get confused. But let's say if it's not less than 18, maybe I input my age as something like 27. In that case, what's going to happen is that we also have something known as else, which means that if something is true, then do this, otherwise do this. So I would be like, okay, if this is greater than 18, or if my age is greater than 18, which means this won't be true, then you should basically do this else. And then else I would be like, okay, output. What do I want to output in that case if the age is greater than 18? Maybe not allowed, right? So not allowed. And then how will I be basically telling the computer that, okay, my structure of if statement has been completed? How will I tell the computer that, okay, I started off with if statement, like let's say you are writing some paragraph. You're writing the paragraph, but then at the end you add a full stop, right? You add a full stop, and that full stop is for the purpose of indicating that you have completed it. So whenever you want to add a full stop for an if statement, this specific statement which we just wrote, this is known as an if statement because it starts off with if. So it's basically given the name of if statement because it starts off with if. Whenever you want to end an if statement, you're going to write the keyword of end if, and this end if clearly ends the whole discussion. And now the computer knows that, okay, you're trying to talk about something. Oh, my bad. If I want to remove this highlighting part, so if I remove this, can I remove this? I guess I cannot though, but okay, itna, okay. But never mind, why did I even highlight it at the first place though? But yeah, if I, let's say, have to write this code, it basically says that you need to input age. Then you're like, okay, if the age is less than 18, yeah, I can, but it's sort of pretty much very difficult. But it's basically input age. Then if I'm like, okay, if age is less than 18, then you need to output allowed, which means that, okay, if I say Samraj is 17, 17 is less than 18, this means the command should go like in a way where, okay, first of all, Samraj is basically assigning some value to age. Samraj is being asked for his age. He's like, okay, 17. Then the 17 comes up here, and then the computer basically conducts a command, and they're like, is the age 17 less than 18? Yes, it is, which means the computer will be like, okay, then you should basically output allow. And then on the screen, so like if I have my screen up here, on my computer screen, I will get the keyword or like this text of allow. But let's say someone like me comes up who is like 19. So now if I come up and I input my age 19, now is if 19 is less than 18, then do this. But is 19 less than 18? No, right? 19 is basically greater than 18, which means that this thingy won't become true. So when this case does not become true, in that case, I will be going to the next step. I'll be like, okay, if this is not true, then do this. If this fails, because this did fail, 19 is not smaller than 18, then I would be outputting not allowed. And then on my screen, I will be basically getting the text of not allowed. And I just sort of created a small program, or perhaps your first paper number 2 program, as to how you might be able to take an input and then make a decision out of it using an if statement. So now you all talked about how we have these gaps at the start, or maybe these gaps are basically known as indentation. So if I have to make it with a pencil, this gap which we have, it's basically following this model, something like this. Then we have the gap coming up here. It's sort of a staircase, right? You might be wondering, why do we have this staircase being created? So this gap which we have at the start, this is known as indentation. You're basically indenting something. You're leaving a small gap. Now, it's not compulsory. You are not compulsory required to leave this gap, but you would have somehow somewhere seen that whenever you are trying to start a new paragraph in an English essay, you always leave two finger space, right? I'm not sure if anybody of you do that, but like I remember I used to start off my paragraph with a gap of 1 or 2 fingers. Why did we used to leave that gap? It was because for 2 reasons. Firstly, it used to look good. Now, whenever I'm making this gap at the start, it is basically indicating that it is sort of looking good, right? If I write everything in one line, input age, if age is 18, then do blah, 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 it's going to be looking a bit messy. But in this case, you can see one thing. It is not only looking good, it is also sort of telling us what's happening afterwards. So I'm like getting that if age is less than 18, if this specific statement is becoming true, if this statement becomes true, then something which is with 1 finger gap, that thing is basically going to be executed. So it's basically telling me that if this part is being executed, this is coming under this section. So it's like this is one separate block. It is telling me that the moment I get to, if the moment this thing is getting true, I'm going to be entering this part of my code. So it's sort of telling me that this output allowed is also coming under the if statement because it's coming under this condition. So if this condition does not get true, I will be never entering the home. It's sort of also similar to saying that this if statement or whatever we have at the start, it's like our house gate. Okay. If you meet this condition, you basically get into the house. Like let's say you are the house owner, so you can get into the specific house lounge. So now entering the house basically means that you are at this point, but now you might get a bit next. So now this isn't compulsory though, leaving this gap, but this gap is basically to show that if something is being executed within something, or maybe something is like a result of something, or like if some statement becomes true and then you want something to happen based upon that decision, you leave a small gap at the start to indicate that, okay, this thing, whatever we have after that gap, it is basically a result of this statement which we had up here. Now you tell me, why am I writing else up here and not else up here? Because if I wrote else at this point, This else would have mean that this else is something which needs to be executed once this condition of age, this becomes true. But this else is executed when this condition becomes false, right? So if this condition is not becoming true, this means that anything which has this gap between it, this gap, we're going to skip all that and we're going to be going back to this place where we have the next statement. Now, when this else statement is becoming true, I'm going to be resulting and we're going to be outputting not allowed. And then afterwards, I'm going to be like end if. Now, the next command would be again starting from this place. Like if I want to say input age once again, for instance. But now this is how and why we leave this gap. The gap is basically for the purpose of indicating that this specific thingy or whatever I have this thing after the gap, this is coming under this statement. Is this somewhat clear to the three of you who asked this one question? Samraj, then we had Kurat, and we also had Nafia, right? Do you guys understand the logic behind why now we have this small gap? So that it's sort of an indicator that if I'm doing something with a gap, this basically means that this thingy is coming under this. So sure, no worries. So I'm basically saying that, let's say you want to understand why do I have this gap. This gap basically means one thing. It's basically like, okay, if I write some specific thing, if age is greater than 18, if I want to do it this way, then, or let's say, then I say output allowed, or ALL, let's say output else, output, output not allowed. Now this isn't wrong. It's not like you're gonna be asked to basically do it in that specific form. Yeah, except for the 15 marker. In 15 marker, you do have marks for the presentation. But now in this point, if you just look at it, do you get it somehow? I'm not getting the flow. When will I be running this else statement? When will I be running this allowed statement? Well, what's happening? It's not making that structure, right? So whenever I want to create a structure, what I'm going to be doing is I'll be basically making it in a way that I'll be like, okay, if age is greater than 80, the command which I need to execute afterwards, I'm going to write that statement with one finger space gap so that I can say that then do this. This is basically telling me that the moment this first statement becomes true, then basically this means that you need to do stuff which is basically with the gap, with the gap. But if this statement is not becoming true, you need to ignore everything which has the gap and you need to go to the next statement just below it, which is going to be what? Which is going to be this else statement. So this else statement would be just below the if statement to basically indicate that if this statement becomes true, then do this part. If not, then leave everything with the gap and just come to the else part. And then what will be else doing? It was basically going to be telling us that now if you are running the else statement, then run and output this statement. But if you are like, let's say doing if statement, then you're like, okay, if age is greater than 80, blah, blah, blah. And then you output this and then you skip this part with the gap and you get to the end of it, which is basically an end if at the end. So this indentation, firstly, makes the code a bit more presentable because it's easier for us to understand. Now, definitely the code which I wrote at this point, understanding what was happening in that would be pretty much very challenging, right? But in this, it's pretty much very understandable that, okay, one thing is greater than 80, then you do this. Otherwise, do this. So you're getting the flow of it. So to make sure that the flow is understandable, we always leave a gap for whatever is happening within it. Now, once we do more and more examples, you're going to understand when and where we're going to be adding this gap. But whenever something happens within a condition, so like I say that if age is greater than 18 and this is something under which something is happening, then I'm going to be leaving this one gap and then I would be doing this. That declare statement thing is something we're going to discuss inshallah in the start of chapter number 8. Right now we are on chapter 7, so we won't be discussing that at this point. So okay, perfect. Is that clear? Kurit, can you also confirm, is that clear or not? If it's not, so let me know so that I can re-explain it to you. Perfect, that's great to know. So the main logic behind why do we indent? It's basically indentation helps make the code more understandable. Firstly, more understandable. Secondly, it's sort of more structured. And it is also sort of easier to know what's happening. So more understandable and more structured. So now if any programmer is marking your 15 marker, for instance, which might be of a 2 page. Now, because it's going to be of a 2 page, it's sort of pretty much very difficult to see if everything is written in one line. So now when we have these gaps, it's sort of pretty much more structured, and I understand what's happening beneath what action, or like what thing is leading to what. So it's sort of easier for me to understand it. Now we're going to discuss this inshallah over time, and over time you automatically going to understand when are we going to leave gap and when not. But if you even look at the code which I'm sort of writing, you're going to still get a good idea of what's sort of happening. But right now, the good part is that congratulations, you all just wrote your first pseudocode statement in this official demo class and May June 26 series. If you have done it previously, though, then we just introduced an if command and we completed this software program using pseudocode statement. So now the moment you enter age, which is not 18, you're going to get the not allowed thingy command. But then just like that, what if I'm like one of you just stated that you also have the if statement after else? So like else if, or like if anybody of you have watched my YouTube, not Instagram video on this, we also have something known as if then else and if then followed by that then. But what if I'm like, okay, in the else section, we sort of have one other command, or like I have some other decision to look onto. So it can be something like if, then else. If there is some other condition, I can also add if afterwards. And then I would be like, okay, and if. How does that work? So for instance, I want to create a program that, okay, if grade is, let's say, greater than 80, then it's something which we're going to do. If the grade is greater than 80, then I will be doing what? Then this means output excellent, which basically means that, okay, you did super well, but let's say your grade is not greater than 80. Then in that case, let's say we have two conditions. Now the main it is a nested if, yeah. But now the thing is, a lot of people were taught this thing, including me, that there is a keyword known as else if something. But in reality, according to the Cambridge standards, there is no keyword like else if. It's basically else is separate, and then you write the if statement again like this: else if a grade is greater than 70, then you like, okay, output grade. Or you can even include the word then, so I can enter the word then. And now just to give you guys a bit better understanding, if you want to write the word then alongside it, that's not a problem. You can definitely write it this way too, but just don't make them a single character. You can do it this way too, then output grade. And this is sort of something which, when you have limited space in your exam, rather than doing it this way, if grade is greater than 80, then using one whole line for then, and then doing output excellent, you can sort of do it this way too. I've done it myself. I got a top in Pakistan distinction, so don't worry. You guys would be good to go if you do it this way too. Just like that, if let's say we have, okay, the grade is even not greater than 70, or I have like something like an else statement, then that else statement is going to come under this if. Now it's going to be coming under this if. Why? Because now at this point, this else statement is basically going to be coming under this. Why? Because it's like, okay, if grade is greater than 70, then you need to do what? You need to execute the stuff within this gap, You need to execute this thing. But if it's not, then just leave this, come down and execute this else statement. So it's not like aapne else yahan pe likhna, you need to write else at this point. And then what's going to be the case if your grade is not even greater than 70? Then you might be like, okay, else output work hard. Okay, work hard. So what we just did was we just implemented a model that if within the else statement, if I need to add a specific sort of if statement, I can basically make use of else, and then within else you should write if grade is greater than 70, and you can sort of continue this within every if. And such a nested situation where we have one thing and we have one sort of command, and then after that I'm like, okay, else if this thing is true, then do this, else if this thing is true, then do that, else if this thing is true, then do that. So sort of even in this case, you're going to see we have like, okay, if this is true, then do that, else if this is true, then do that. Or I can even continue like, right, if this statement is true, do that, and blah blah blah. It can continue. Such a scenario of where we have an if statement repeating, we call this a nested if. A nested if, where we basically have an if statement within an if statement. So we have an if statement. This if statement is basically coming within this main if statement. So when we have an if statement within an if statement, it's basically known as a nested if. If statement within a if statement, within a if statement, within an if statement. Is this clear, everybody? In the chat box, quickly. Till then, I'm going to answer this one question. Do we need to input first grade for this code? Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yes, you are required to input the grade for this one too. Well, this is just sort of like an explanation. So for that reason, I did not. But yeah, you would be required to input it. Otherwise, if you had the grade prior to it, or like the question already said that you have the grade, then that's a different story. But if it's not told to you, then in that case, yes. Sir, how do we have to strictly declare blah blah? Okay, so this declaration thingy is something which we are going to be doing at the start of chapter number 8. So don't worry. Right now we're just understanding the fundamentals. That thing is something we're going to come towards when we start chapter number 8. So yes, we're going to discuss that in great detail there. Don't worry. So now this is one way of discovering and making use of if statements. If, then, else, if, and if. Or like if, then, else, and if. It's sort of else and if, but if you want to add an if within, after, else, you can do it and it's up to you. So now the thing is, if you're writing this else statement in exam, don't write something like else if. This is basically not wrong though, but don't write it this way. Perhaps if you have to do it, always add a bit of a gap. This is according to the examiner standard. Okay, your examiner expects you to write it this way, else if, or like you can do it the way I wrote it. You can write else in one, and then you can write the if statement beneath it. That's going to be the best method. So both of them are basically correct, but the first one was something a lot of students are aware of and they're basically taught the wrong way, but this is not something which has been verified according to the Cambridge syllabus. So that is one extra point I wanted you all to share, and this is one way of how you can basically make decisions when you're writing a code in computer science or when you're doing some pseudocode statements. Just like that, you can also write some pseudocode statements one using one other way, and that second method is given a structure of case, of, otherwise, and case. And now you would be like, sir, what is case, of, otherwise, and case? I heard it like for the first time. Am I cooked? No, don't worry. This if statement has one thing. It's like if something happens, then do this, otherwise do that. So it's sort of for a limited features, unless you do this cases like okay, else if, else if, else if, else if. But now if I have like 10 different cases, would that mean something like this: if, then else, if, then else, if, then else, if, then else? And you can see how long my code is just going to be. Like it's going to be so long. It's going to be so long. So when we have, sorry for that, but now when we have multiple cases, just the way Nafi has stated perfectly, that whenever we have multiple cases, we're going to make use of something known as case of statements. Now how does case of statement works? Now case of statements has sort of a structure which goes like case, and then after case you write the keyword of, and then you talk about what thing you're basically trying to discuss. So in this case we are basically discussing grades, let's say. So case of grades. And then what we do is we write the grade up here, or like the value up here, and then we are like, okay, what would be the output if that becomes true? So for instance, I could be like, okay, case of grade, if I say the grade has the letter A, if it has the letter A, then you're going to add a colon and you'll be like, okay, then output excellent. Excellent. Otherwise, if I want to have a grade of B, then that's like, okay, output good. Output good. Otherwise, if it's like C, then I would be like, okay, output okay. Output okay. If it's D, I would be like, okay, output needs work. Needs work. Otherwise, if it's any grade below that, I would be like, okay, otherwise, if there is a grade below that, then what I want you to do is you should just output that you failed. Output failed. Failed. And in the end, I would be like, okay, end case, which is directly going to be below the starting point, end case. Now, this is one other sort of a decision-making pattern, or like not, it would not be efficient. Then the input variable name goes in the bracket. There's no input variable. Yeah, it's like a general example. Let's assume you inputted the grade below or before this. Like if you guys want the input, we can do it that way too. So like maybe I take the input first. So I'll be like, okay, input grade. So whatever condition, whatever variable on which you want to basically apply a condition, this bracket is not even necessary. You can even remove this bracket. But you should be aware that this grade basically tells me that you want to see the value of this grades. And you're going to see whatever value you have in this. If that value is equal to A, then you need to output excellent. If it's equal to B, output good. If it's equal to C, output okay. If it's equal to D, output needs work. But if it's none of them, let's say you had something like E inside it, then you should just output failed. And that is one easier way to write code. Why? Because definitely you are not required to basically write the whole if statement like this way. If grade is greater than 80, and output X. Else if grade is greater than 70, output B. Else if grade is greater than 60, output C. Else if grade is greater than 50, output D, and so on. So you see the other one was sort of very long, very, very, very long. And when we have a very long code, that code is correct. It's not wrong, but it is sort of inefficient. And at the same time, it's going to waste your time, because you're going to waste your precious time on literally writing something which could be done in a few lines. So like, rather than writing 15 lines there, wasting that much space, you can do the whole thing in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or like, perhaps even if you want to shorten it up, you can also write this output thingy up here too. Maybe do it this way. Otherwise, output this and bring this up here. So now this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 lines code, which basically replace the whole 15 to 20 lines code for the if statements. So now remember, whenever in exams, you are given a scenario where you have multiple cases, always remember multiple cases equal to case of statement. Always go with case statement. But if you have a scenario where you need to basically make use of a few example like if, then, else, then ideally two or three, go with if statement. So that is something I want you all to be well aware of. Is this clear or not? This is basically how your computer can make decisions, or how you can basically write code in a way where your computer can basically take input, and based upon that input, it is going to be doing a decision. So like, if your grade is A, do this. If grade is, let's say, greater than 80 for if statement, then it's going to do that. And that is everything you all are required to know for the purpose of understanding conditional statements. Now, all these statements which we just studied, these two statements, are known as conditional statements, and they basically allow us to help and basically work with conditions. So if we have a specific condition, if we have two conditions, we can use this if statements. Or if I want to have like a larger list of conditions, I can make use of this format. So if I have to just write the format for you guys so that you guys could have a better idea of it before ending the class, the format is sort of like this. So I would be like, okay, if, and I can say condition, whatever the condition is, if condition, then do something, do something. Or I can even improve this. If condition is basically true, whatever the condition you have, then do something else. If not true, then do whatever you want to do, you can do that. So else do something. So basically, whenever you need to write some if statement, you follow this model. You write the condition. If that condition is true, you basically come to this place where you need to do something. And then if that is not true, if the above failed, then you basically need to make use of this condition. That is the whole logic behind if statement. Whereas if you want to make use of the case statement, it's basically case of, whenever you make use of case statements, in that you're going to have sort of a variable using which you're going to specify that, okay, this variable, I want to check the value of this variable. Or if this condition, like I might be like, okay, if this variable has the value of 80, or if this variable has the value of A, it's going to be 80. If it has the value of B, or like I can also say if the value of variable is 80, if there was blah, 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 blah. Okay, perfect, let's do that. So let's say I say that rather than having the grade letter wise, I might have case of grades, but it's sort of something where I might be doing if it's basically, remember, this is sort of a model which is generally for something letter wise. But if you want to do it something like case of grades, and let's say I have something like 80, I might be like, okay, if the value has, let's say, 80 in it, then you can say output excellent, and so on. You can say 70, and so on, so on, so on. But in this case, the problem is it's not identifying a sort of range inside it. So if you want to indicate some sort of range so that it's take case of 80 to 90, 60 to 70, 70 to 80, just the way we did up here, where we were sort of doing something like if grade is greater than 70, then for that case, you need to make use of if statement. But if you have something like a character, that's why I'm saying that if you have a variable which has a single value in it, and you have multiple cases for that, you should be making use of case statements. So like case of, then you will whatever variable is. So I can write the name of variable up here, and then up here you can basically write condition one followed by a colon, and then your statement, whatever you want to do with it, whatever you want to output something, you want to do whatever, you can basically do that way. And then you can basically sort of do it for whatever, how many conditions you have. So like if I have three conditions, let's say, okay, how do you, oh, my bad. So if I want to double it, let's do it this way. And so like, let me just erase this. I can basically say your condition number two is going to be like this, three like this, and then at the end, you're going to write end case. So this is the whole format of how you need to make use of case of and if statements if you want to basically write a specific sort of conditional or decision making statement. Is this clear or not? I would also have a look at how you can basically make use of this greater than 80 thingy, because I remember I did see a scenario like this too, but I have to see it how we further use it. So is this clear or not? Or if there are any questions, let me know. All right. No questions. Let me see. No questions. Perfect. That's great to know. Everybody else. Correct. Is it clear? Eyes are clear? सबने बता दिया I guess बाकियों ने. Perfect. That's super great to know. All right, it's 11 or 13. That's all for today. See you guys inshallah tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to be having our last demo class for our paper number 2 session. After this, only the registered students would be taking the class with us. We have basically added them to a different group. If you want to register for a course, you can reach out to me in my DMs, or the registration form is basically in the WhatsApp group's bio link. Not the bio, basically the description, yeah. And then you'll be added to a different group. And inshallah, in tomorrow's class, we're going to learn a bit about repeating specific commands, or what we have been calling as loops. So inshallah, we're going to exploring that part. It's going to be really fun, but I hope you all had a great learning experience and that you understood the whole logic behind if statements and these case statements. Yeah, of course, I'm going to share the notes, inshallah, in a while. Don't worry. So yeah, everybody, so it's 11 or 15. Take care, everybody. See you guys tomorrow, inshallah, at the same time. Allah Hafiz. Bye-bye. Allah Hafiz. Allah Hafiz.